Such a heartbreaking story by Mercy Kandie, and I'm joined in studio by Dr. Susan Gitau, who is a counseling psychologist. Thank you so much for joining us on Citizen Extra, as well as Tonny Odera, a human rights lawyer who prefers to call himself so, but is also an expert in protecting the children's rights. Thank you both for coming through. And first of all, we see that story, which is, it's astonishing that young boys are now being assaulted by their fellow minors, just older. What would lead to such kind of situation in schools?
Well, there are so many causes that make children turn against other children, especially sexually, what we call child-on-child sexual violence. Some it is because it happened to them. Probably they were exposed to indecent sexual images. Some could have been sexually molested. Some, it could be the family setting. Sometimes when you expose children to sexual acts in the house, and when I talk about this, I think about the informal settlements, because that's where you find a lot of child-on-child sexual violence taking place. You realize the child wants to reenact the same. Some of them, they could be developing antisocial behavior, or what we call antisocial personality. So you find a child trying weird things, and probably nobody has noticed. The other thing is that there's a lot of abuse that is still going on, as much as there are very many campaigns against child abuse, that children who are aggressive, in most cases against other children, have been abused. So they turn abusers. So I will actually go to a safer object that happens to be that class 1, or that happens to be a form 1, because it's also happening in high schools. If I am a form 4, form 3. So we are also talking about parenting. And currently I'm actually saying almost every parent in Kenya today, if they don't take care, your child is being harmed because you are too busy for that child. So the parenting that has taken a paradigm shift, parents need to rethink. For example, when you even listen to this case study, it took a while before the parents got to know it. How often do we even check our children physically? You know, this is your child. And I say children, especially families that are dysfunctional, they're not able to express their emotions. In fact, I'm very disappointed to learn that that child up to now cannot express themselves. Look at even the fear of the police. We are talking about children's desks at the police stations. Who are manning these children's desks? So there's a lot of fear with our children that they cannot express themselves. I also want to say teachers. Sorry, teachers, I was once a teacher. But you can imagine when teachers do not know even how to talk to these children about their own safety, especially their own sexual safety. Mostly it's because there's lack of competence in that area. Because if you let a child know, apparently when you tell a child something, just like if you can remember when we were told, I don't know whether you are told something, head issue, Danny, centers, you know, you knew those parts, but who really helped you to know that you have some parts of your body that are private to you and nobody else should touch them? So how many of us also know how to communicate with children at their level? Because we need to have what is child-friendly language. So to me, I see also a lot of ignorance in the society and not reading the times, that where we are right now, things need to change. Our parenting, our teaching, and even our community relationships. And Tonny, in your practice, how often do you hear such kind of situations? Because you are specializing in protecting the children's rights, or defending them and representing them in court if that requires it. But how often do you hear of boys being molested by other boys?
When you look at the situation of sexual abuse among the boy child, people tend to think that this is a new phenomenon. That isn't true. This phenomenon has been with us for ages. And what happens is maybe we're now having a lot of children who are a bit empowered and are able to actually speak out about these vices. The second thing, if you look at the future story of that child, that issue would not have become reported were it not for the physical pain that it caused the child. You can see now they cannot pass urine normally. It's a painful experience to go and do that. That's a normal cause of nature of things. So because of that, then they had to resort to the parent and tell the parent, when I do this, I feel pain. So that opened up the avenue for reporting. And then when you look at, again in that story, the 2 or 3 things that we need to also look at that we shouldn't forget. What is the effect of technology and technological devices among our young generation? If you go to some schools today, I can assure you, you'll find kids with smartphone. Go to the elite schools, you'll find kids with smartphone. If you go to high school, it's the same. Come at home, kids have TV in their own bedrooms.
And, consuming.
and what exactly are they watching? If you go on YouTube, what exactly are they watching? If you go on Facebook, kids are on Instagram. And what are they putting actually on Instagram? We've talked about a scenario in Kitale where boys are recruiting other boys to perpetrate sodomy against other children. It's an area of concern.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at, because according to the Gender Violence Recovery Center, at least 1 billion children aged 2 to 17 have experienced physical, sexual or emotional violence or neglect in their lives. That is to do with globally. But also the GVRC says that they have rescued 40,000 survivors during their experience, which runs into several years. And 53% of those that were supported by GVRC were women, 36% were girls, 7% were boys, and 4% were men. So, Tony, looking at this, it appears that the boys and men, they just account for 11%. So is it the real reflection of reality, or is it just some sort of underreporting? Are the boys shy of reporting to such kind of agencies?
You remember, Sam, when this discussion around the Sexual Offences Act was taking place, and the whole issue as to whether a male person can actually be abused sexually without them having the will and desire to participate in it. That is what contributes to part of that statistics. There is this myth in society that as a boy child, you cannot be had to report certain things. It's a show of weakling. You're not man enough.
Right.
And because of that, it affects the figures that are actually going to be reported, as compared to when you compare with a girl child, where as soon as it happens, everybody's in uproar. This is wrong. So it sort of lend credence to the low figures on reporting from the male perspective, but I believe what is happening out here is more than what those figures show.
Dr. Gitau, just before you respond to that, let's take at some other statistics that have to do with the children violation. Between April 2017 and March 2018, the boys that reported to GVRC were 252. That appears to be 225, and then the girls were 1,487, and the total of those affected was 1,739. So talking about the boys versus the girls, you can see that a majority of them are girls, even to do with the children, those who are between 2 and 17. So again, I ask you the same question. Psychologically, when you do counseling on such kind of victims, talking about the girls and the boys, how likely is it that boys are going to report these kind of incidences in their lives?
Well, if you look at women and men, naturally, we are good at expressing ourselves. We have lots of words even to say things differently. The same case goes to boys and girls. So we'll actually find a boy not being able to report so well what happened to them. And by the way, this complicates even the legal system process. But the girls will tell you that they did this, they removed my panty. But for a boy, they might even tell you, if it's maybe the sodomy part of it, they will tell you they put in a very blunt object behind my back. You can imagine even these lawyers, how they also take that as evidence. There is no evidence there, it is not convincing. So I think the way the society also has brought up the boy child, we need to empower them to be more expressive. We need to tell them it's actually not wrong, because when I have been violated, it is my right to be held, it is my right to be heard, it is my right to be protected. You realize even when we look at GVRC, actually most people think GVRC is for women. In fact, even when men are taken there and boys, they want to be gotten out as soon as possible. I think it's a high time we thought about having men-specific, boy-specific rescue centers where they can talk man to man, boy to boy. I guess that will help, because if you are taken to Nairobi Women's and you are a man, and that is where we have the GVRC, you start thinking, what's
the name is already wrong.
Just like you going to FIDA, because you also have a right to go there.
Yes.
People look at you as weak. I think this time we need to think about the gender issue very seriously, and we need to empower the boy child.
All right.
Believe you me, the boys that I have handled, it's very sad, because a lot, in fact, even some people don't believe. And it's important for the society to say, if a child just raises an alarm that have been abused, the first person you need to believe is that child. Before you go proving other people wrong, believe in that child and do something about them. I can also say we have very few rescue houses, even halfway houses, because if today I report that my son has been sexually violated, I am supposed to report and go back with them to the house. And probably that is where the abuse happened. And the same community is where it happened. I think it's a high time we thought about these people, because the effects, as we're going to talk about it later, they last for so long. For so long. Will affect their family life, will affect their own lives with other people, and we are now raising eyebrows and saying there's a lot of gayism and lesbianism rising in high schools. It's because some of them are just repeating what happened when they were children. They were younger. There's a lot of re-victimization.
Let's try to contextualize that and look at the third slide of statistics, where we see that out of those affected, the children affected, we had below 5 years, 225 children that sought help from GVRC, that is the Gender Violence Recovery Center. 225 were below 5 years, and those who are between 5 to 11 years were 660, and those who are between 12 to 17 years are 852. So you'd see that at the lower row, those are the teenagers, and then 5 to 11, these are people who are the children who are in the early years of primary school until around class 6, and then below 5 years, these are minors, probably the kindergarten, or still staying at home. But we may also need to contextualize on where or when these incidences happen. That is in accordance with slide 5 that talks about offenses during the day accounted for about 55%. If we can have that slide that talks about when these offenses are carried out during the day, 55%. Night hours is 33%, and both day and night is 9%. But of course, one might ask, where do these incidences happen? And if I may recall from the story that was run by Mercy Kandi, it talks about most of them happening at their homes. Actually, we have that slide that we can highlight, the 5th slide that talks about where these incidences occur. That is, survivors' home is about 664, and those that happen away from their homes but still in private homes is 572, and those that happen in school 65. I'm sure that slide will be coming up shortly. But just to show you the incidences that because 55% happening during the day, these are most likely in areas that these children are used to. These are people that they know. Yes. Why would that be the situation?
For me, I think we still treat sexual matters as private. And so when we also want to play with the minds of people who think this is not good behavior, we would want to do it during the day. And again, when we talk about the schools, for example, the school environment, how many teachers even go to inspect the toilets? Rarely would they, especially in the rural setups and even in the informal settlements. Some of them don't even know what's happening there. Just like we were just discussing with Odera, like in prisons. Nobody wants to know what happens in there. You also find these children are violated when they are going home. It's very sad that my child is not safe on their way to school. Right. They are not safe at home. They are also not safe when I leave them also with the house helps. And I basically want to say, even the kind of house helps we have gotten in our houses, these are not their children. You told me by the time you come back in the evening, I should have done the cooking and all that. So there is also inter-sibling sexual violence.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's there. And when you hear of during the day, like holidays, how many parents bother to know what their children are doing? During the day is when we are also able to interact with other people. There's a lot of sexting by children.
Sure.
Yes. So you realize at the end of the day, parents, teachers, social workers, maybe even for us who are protecting the human rights, we are not thinking that we need to talk about things in a very open manner. So for me, I would say there's a lot of trickery on sexual violence, especially child-on-child sexual violence. There is also a lot of ignorance, because when we are ignorant about something, we cannot address what we don't know.
Sure.
So at the moment, I also do not want to say we are safe as a nation, because if we are helped most of the time by NGOs, why can't the government? We do have the Child Welfare Society of Kenya. When was the last time they gave us statistics on sexually abused children, and especially by children? We are there in schools. Do we have statistics from the Ministry of Education? Because when we have the statistics, just like GVRC, when they have these statistics, they know what to do.
Sure.
They will say, now we need this kind of a facility, we need this kind of competence. But when we do not have even the statistics to help us make the right decisions, believe you me, we will be grouping in the dark.
Right. And Tonny, when these cases are reported to you, like, how is the process like? What are the difficulties that children and their parents or their guardians experience when they are approaching people like you?
Now, as we deal with the reporting aspect, maybe something else to shed more light on these statistics, where it talks about home. When we look at home, let's take it to be inclusive of both the residence where the child lives and also the residence. It could actually be where the abuser lives. So that abuse could also be happening there. Now, in terms of when these cases are reported, the first crucial thing is evidence collection, because we're talking about a very sad scenario, and it's a sexual offense. With sexual offenses, the things that happen at the initial stages are more important. If we have a sexual violence case being reported, and we are talking about a scenario whereby the child has been bathed, their clothes have been changed, the clothes that they were initially wearing put up in water, soaked to be washed, because it's something we consider as dirt. Then, Houston, we have a problem because the evidence is already interfered with.
Sure.
The second thing we have to also look at is what is the mental situation of this child and the health generally, because we have incidences of abuse that are leading to sexual transmitted diseases and infection, including HIV and AIDS.
Sure.
So it would be important that this child be able to access efficient, effective medical care from a hospital or from a doctor, because that would help to safeguard their health from contracting these diseases. Alongside health comes psychosocial support, because again, for me to begin dealing with this child, I have to have a child who's able to express and narrate what happened. That can only happen if they have been through some process of counseling and they have received some psychosocial support assistance. Then we have to look at also the next thing is, how do we protect this child? We have a witness protection program, we have a victim protection program in this country.
Sure.
When do these initiatives get to be activated so that this child and their family are able to continue with their lives unaffected, while at the same time preparing the process of taking this child to court? Then comes the worst nightmare, the police station.
Sure.
Because even you saw in this feature story, where for the child to tell the truth, the parent has to threaten them that if they don't say the truth, they will report them to the police.
Sure.
Now, this child now needs to go with the parents to the police to report the incident that happened. You think this child is going to be able to even process that information at the police station? Comes in another problem. And then we then have got to deal with, we've taken all this information, packaged up a case file, then we have to go to court with it. The first thing, you go to court at 9 o'clock, the child will be told they and their parents have to be in court by 9 o'clock. They're there at 9 o'clock. The magistrates comes in at 10 o'clock. They start mentioning traffic and other funny offenses. This case needs to be heard now at 12 midday. The child has been in court. or along the court corridors from 9? Do you think at 12 they are in such a state of mind to be able to process and narrate what happened? Then in certain instances where if we do not take protection very seriously, the child and the accused or the suspect have come into contact during that process in court. That suspect has already intimidated the child, even through intermediaries and through other people known to them. So you're finding you dealing with a family of a victim who is terrified to want to give evidence against an accused person that they already fear. And because of that, it affects the quality of evidence. Then come the law itself that says, if the evidence that is tendered and everything else comes, but you as the judge or the magistrate listening to the matter, you are in doubt, give the benefit of doubt to the accused person. The accused person hires a lawyer. There is no lawyer watching brief to assist the child, the complainant, through the criminal process. They are at a disadvantage. Yeah.
Great. And if you are joining the conversation, you're talking about the abuse of innocence, the feature that aired yesterday. Of course, now joined by the Executive Director of the Gender Violence Recovery Center, that is Alberta Wambua. Thank you for joining us. And of course, if you have concerns, issues that you may want to raise, questions that you may want to ask, you can write to us on 22422, as well as on Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya, and on Facebook on Citizen TV Kenya page. Of course, we will be looking at your response, your feedback, so that we can raise those issues with the panel of experts in matters protecting the children. And we begin with Alberta. We have seen the statistics that we got from your institution talking about majority of those that report these cases are either women or girls. We have very little of cases being reported by boys. And I had asked them the question, they felt that the boy child feels intimidated. Is it a true reflection of the situation on the ground, or do your statistics suffer the condemnation of people who do not want to really file their cases with institutions like you because they are men?
Okay, so a number of reasons. So thank you for inviting me. One, the clients who come to GVC and to any health facility, and that's the service point where you get a number of survivors reporting, as opposed to others like the security and the rest, is a very small percentage. So there are many more survivors who are being abused. It needs to be clear on that. And because then, again, we are culturalized, also the response systems in place, availability and access of the same. Second, because then there are also some forms of violence, gender-based violence, that are culturally entrenched. So there are people who violate or are violated and do not realize then that it's even violence. So that's a very small reflection. Again, the survivors who come to GVSC are usually severe cases, most of them. So people not come, for example, for psychological abuse, which we do not realize that, or we do not appreciate that it's a form of violence, or they'll not come for minor injuries. So those are representation of the really severe cases. So just to mention that that's a very small percentage. Now, for the women and girls are more vulnerable to violence for many obvious reasons, for power relation reasons. So you get more women and girls reporting, for example, the health facility. But again, we're getting more and more men reporting violence, and for a number of reasons why most of them will equally not report, and will only report when it's really severe cases, like really gang rape, or for example, the last 1 year that we were discussing, we had 3 penile reconstruction surgeries. So unless it's really that severe, then you'll find men coming up. Simple reason, socialization, for example. When kids are growing up, would say, men do not cry, you know, men do not. So there's, would I say, stigma when men are abused and reported, both by fellow men or by the society at large and everyone else. So some of the reasons why we get a smaller percentage of men reporting, but they do report.
Great. We'll be taking a short break, but when we return, we'll be talking about the things that you have to look out for from a trauma counseling point of view. I hope I got that right.
Right.
The signs that you have to look out for as a parent, and also how difficult it is for these young children to really understand what's happening to them and look for help when they need it. Of course, do stay tuned for Citizen Extra returns shortly, but you can send in your questions once again, as I said, via SMS on 22422, Citizen TV Kenya on Twitter, as well as on Facebook page, that is Citizen TV Kenya. Do stay tuned.